Hope everybody's doing well. I hear it's cold, cold, cold in the rest of America. You can see me here in a t-shirt. Cool t-shirt, actually. And it's the warmest summer. See, I keep saying that. I keep saying that to Natasha. It's the warmest summer we've ever had. It's the warmest winter I can ever remember. It's crazy warm, hot. Not trying to brag or anything. When you live in warm climates your whole life, you definitely start pining for the fjords. And I miss it being a little cold, but it's been crazy, crazy, crazy warm here. And I hear the rest of the country freezing its butt off. And now the South's getting whacked as well. So not trying to show off or anything. And I'm adult enough to admit that, that this, boy, I love cold weather. It's so exciting and just, it's like so motivating and keeps you going and makes your blood flow and all the rest of it. I'm sure that'd last about a solid week or two at the most if I actually had to live with it and deal with the slush and stuff. But it gives me something to complain about. That makes me happy. In any event, we we did about 4 or 5 minutes on the weather on our backstage show with Steve and Scott. I thought, man, that is top quality entertainment for your membership dollar, boy. Hearing 3 people on the internet talk about the weather. But anyway, that's basically it. That's basically what's going on. Working on the same stuff as before. I thought what I might do, because we always do a little warm-up before we get into the questions, and I have to keep it short tonight. I have a video I have to shoot right after this. I really can't tell you about it yet. I wouldn't say it's top secret yet, but by next week I should be able to make an announcement. I'm kind of going all in on something with a short fuse on it. So I'll be working on that a little bit later tonight, so I can't go too long tonight. But I thought I might give you a preview of what I'm going to do for the next firewall. I'm going to call it Shakespeare and blank holes, S-holes. Shakespeare and S-holes is what it's going to be called. I didn't get a look at the final number. I know that the firestorm around this whole thing with Donald Trump was pretty crazy and high on the list of the suggested topics on the firewall experiment, which helps me enormously. I don't think it was first when I looked at it last time. In any event, I don't know. These are the kind of things that just really interest me. And we covered it a little bit. I don't know if it was last week. I guess it was. Or certainly it was the week before if it wasn't last week, where I showed you that clip of a guy named Ben Crystal doing Shakespeare, doing Hamlet's soliloquy in as close to a manner as it is possible for us to recreate right now. And I'll kind of tell you how this ties into Donald Trump's, stuff hole comment, which he either did or did not make. Yeah, ice holes. That's it. That's it, Dave. Fargan ice holes. You bastages. That's a, if you don't know what that's from, look up Johnny Dangerously. Look up Moroni. He's a Italian mobster who's just gotten to America and he doesn't know how to curse correctly, so he keeps calling people a bunch of Fargan ice holes, and it's just perfect, beautiful. He's got a speech in front of Congress, which I would like to just basically have engraved on my forehead and tattooed, and Moroni's speech in front of Congress is the second best monologue in the history of the English language. I know you're thinking the best monologue is the one I was just talking about a moment ago, to be or not to be. That is the question. When in point of fact, that's actually the third best monologue written in the English language. The second best is Moroni's speech in front of Congress, and the first best monologue ever written in the English language certainly is from Twisted Sister, where the dad comes in and he basically says, "What is that? A Twisted Sister pin on your uniform?" And then the greatest line in English ever written of any place at any time. He looks at him and he says, "You're worthless and weak." I was gone at that point. This guy who played the ROTC cadet back at Animal House, I've forgotten his name, but he's really brilliant. "You're worthless and weak. You do nothing. You are nothing. You sit here all day and play that sick electric twanger. And there's a couple other little bits that I'm missing, but then he's pointing to the guitar and he basically, I carried an M16 and you carry that guitar. 3 that's. That's just, it's magnificent. It's magnificent writing. That guitar. Then I think he says, you're worthless a week old, you know. Boy, I do love that so much. I may have to get that and pull it out. Because his what's that? He says, "What are you? Who are you? What do you want to do with your life?" And the kid stands up, says, "I want to rock," and plays a riff on the guitar and blows him out the window. But Mark something I want to say, Mark or Mike. He's good. I'm so, you know what? I'm gonna. It's my by God show, and I'm gonna by God play it. Because some things cannot be left unsaid or unseen. So let's see. We'll go through the same nightmare we went through last time. Too bad if you don't like it. Just get your own show. And is it? We're gonna. Yes. Okay. Let me just download this bad boy here, and then we will all experience the joy of what I can't see the comment section. But what is this guy's name? This actor's name? Somebody's undoubtedly told me already. Anyway, here it is. Let me just get it downloaded. It's worth the wait. It's my favorite thing in the world. I love it so. Which means I have to go to this bloody downloader thingy-doody. Hope everybody's doing well. Otherwise, it's been, I think this is our 4th or 5th show in a row, which has got to be some kind of a record. And we're not going to be talking about the topic that everybody's tired of talking about. So there you go. Hang in there. It's all right. Everything's cool. Everything's cool. Nobody panic. See, the great thing about a stream of consciousness show is that you never get to prepare for it because you don't have any idea what you're going to say. So there's the cut. And here comes the pasty. We're getting there, my golly. If you haven't seen it lately, you haven't seen it. If you remember it from when you were young, because this was one of the first, well, not one of the very first videos on MTV, but if you remember it from when you were young, great. And for those of you who've never seen it before, you're in for a major treat here. Being processed. Here comes the download. Come on, baby. So I'm not going to play the whole music video, tempting though that will be. Just do it. Just do it. Just. There it is. Okay, here it comes. Here it comes. Mark, what is his name? Mark, he's probably 100 years old now, which is in itself depressing. All right, so here we go. We'll just pump this baby in here, and then I will quietly assume the port of Mars, and we'll see if we can get this. See if to get this guy to go. I'm going to go to the title card. Mark Metcalf, thank you very much, Dan, or whoever else got it earlier. I'm going to go to the title card, and then we're going to play this because I want to turn it up so I can hear it myself.
Pass the carrots, please.
May I be excused, please? Yes, dear.
What is that? I know what that is. That's music.
Douglas, see, please. He's just a child.
Don't Douglas see me? All right, mister, what do you think you're doing? You call this a room? This is a pigsty. I want you to straighten up this area now! You are a disgusting slob! Stand up straight! Tuck in that shirt! Adjust that belt buckle! Tie those shoes! Twisted sister! What is that? Wipe that smile off your face. Do you understand? What is that? A twisted sister pin on your uniform? What kind of a man are you? You're worthless and weak. You do nothing. You are nothing. You sit in here all day and play that sick, repulsive, electric twanger. I carried an M16 and you carry that guitar. Who are you? Where do you come from? Are you listening to me? What do you want to do with your life?
I want to rock.
It's the greatest monologue in the English language. There's so many things I want to say about that. First of all, the wife is terrific, and the water in the end is fantastic. I'd forgotten that actually the best moment of that clip, is when the father first breaks down the door upstairs. He says, "What is that?" And then you see the little brother just laughing into his cereal. It's just absolutely epic. If we had more dads like that, this country wouldn't be in the kind of trouble it's in today. I've got that memorized because I would like to actually think that someday I'm going to be at a Walmart and one of these little horrific little brats is just going to be just acting up, and I'm just going to, I don't even know who the mom is. I don't care. I'm just going to walk up to him, stand up straight, tie those shoes, tuck in that shirt. You're worthless and weak. You do nothing. You are nothing. What's this? If you go back and watch it afterwards, the way that he puts, the way that he pronounces "twisted sister," there's never been anything like it. Twisted sister. Oh my God. I sure do miss that. Anyway, Shakespeare, distant third to that. So back to the story. God, I so much want to play it again. So here's what's interesting about this. I'd heard this in passing. A lot of times I pick up all the information I can. I'm just kind of a vacuum cleaner for information. A lot of times I hear things that I actually file, in some way or another. I just kind of, that's interesting. That's something I just wasn't aware of, but I don't have any particular reason to follow it any further. But one of those things, small camera adjustment here. One of those things was somebody telling me quite a while ago, maybe a couple years ago, at least something like that, that because I think we're talking about the Revolution, the American Revolution, and somebody said that I remember saying something to the effect of, it's hard to imagine that Americans, at the time of the Revolution, we sounded like British. We sounded, George Washington had a British accent. That some kind of comment like that. And somebody pointed out to me that no, actually, King George had an American accent. And what? And it turns out that this British accent spoken by the Queen and formerly spoken by the BBC English, is an accent that was invented. It was invented in the mid-1800s, which in the history of this language is yesterday. And this is where it ties into the press thing for me. It's where I want to make the connection anyway. So here's basically the story. That very, very tony British accent that we're all so used to on the BBC, very clipped, very perfect, very high, very, very, very noble sort of British accent, which Shakespeare must be spoken in, is a complete invention, and it's completely artificial. It's called received pronunciation, and it didn't exist anywhere. But so I was interested in it, and I dug up this because I was so much interested in it because I liked Ben Crystal's reading of Shakespeare much better, and it's much more powerful hearing it the way it was supposed to be heard. So I actually got a little bit into trying to find the history of this received pronunciation, and what I found was that in the mid-1800s in Britain, as more and more people, because of the miracles of capitalism and the industrial era, as more and more people started to send their kids to schools, decent grammar schools. I went to a British grammar school. This accent was developed basically because there were so many different accents from all around the British Isles. If you listen to people who really know the difference, some people can really, with a decent ear, can tell you where in London that speaker's from within a couple blocks. And so this sort of standard British pronunciation called received pronunciation, meaning received from above, was in a way sort of like the precursor for the fact that no matter where you go in America now, in fact, to my ultimate heartbreak, I realize that the same thing is true in Bermuda on TV stations. I haven't been to Bermuda since 1972, but I listened to a little Bermuda TV a couple years ago, and the newscasters sounded like they were doing the news from Cleveland, Ohio. And when you get right down to it, you find out that newscasters are doing the news all across this country, and they all sound like they're from everywhere and nowhere. They're speaking this universal, non-accented American English. And the newscasters in major stations anyway, in New Orleans sound virtually identical to newscasters in Maine, or Boston, or any of these other places, or Houston, and all the rest. So all those accents were bled out, and they were bled out. I suppose the kindest way to do it is if you wanted to appeal to everybody, but that's not what actually happened. What happened, it's true in the American media, which is where I'm going to make this connection. But with the case of perceived pronunciation, here's what happened. So they have English grammar schools decide that there's going to be an official form of English, and it's going to sound like this. And it's the sound that the Queen makes, It's just very high, very, very clipped, extremely rigid, very odd pronunciations, and all of this stuff. And it was invented. So what happened was, as more and more people were able to send their kids to these schools, these kids came back speaking received pronunciation, having had it beaten into them. And so this very toffee-nosed, posh British accent was actually a sign of achievement. If you or your child spoke like that, it was an indication that you'd had breeding. And the British being obsessed with royalty as they are, and nobility, it gave common British people a sense of being, at the very least, a gentleman or a lady. And so what received pronunciation became was it became a kind of a language spoken by a group of people that wanted to be elite, but really weren't. But certainly, if they were going to move in elite circles, they couldn't speak with a Yorkshire accent. They couldn't speak with a Cockney accent. If they wanted to succeed in the banking business in London in the late 1800s all the way through the 20th century, and until very recently, you simply couldn't speak like that. They wouldn't hire you because proper institutions speak received pronunciation. And by the way, a couple people have mentioned Henry Higgins and My Fair Lady and Pygmalion. That's basically it. He's trying to teach this woman who speaks Cockney English how to speak perfect received pronunciation. The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain. But it became a form of virtue signaling. It became a language and a status that people had to show each other how well educated they were. And it occurs to me that that's essentially exactly what's happens with our news media and the rest of our Washington and Hollywood elites. It's not that they all speak in the same kind of an accent, but they do have this same kind of a clubby sort of thing. They all believe the same things. They all went to the same schools. Their belief systems are absolutely identical to each other. No one is allowed to get off the farm. If anybody has an opinion about something in the media stratosphere, somebody has a different opinion on abortion or something like that, or religion, then that's just the same as speaking like a Cockney chimney sweep at a reception for Queen Victoria. And so this whole thing became a club, this received pronunciation club, and in the same way that these attitudes and beliefs and manner of thinking has become a club for news media types who, in my last firewall, I said, are people with an IQ of 102 who think that means they're smart enough to tell you how to live your life. And all of these people believe this. They all believe they're smarter than we are. They all believe they're much smarter than we are, and that all the things they believe in, socialized medicine and all of it, they believe is what intelligent people think, because they're surrounded by intelligent people, and God knows they must be very intelligent because they certainly want to be. And so they're surrounded by these people who all reinforce their own beliefs in the same way that received pronunciation reinforced everybody else's beliefs 150 years ago. But the part of it that's so interesting to me is that these toffee-nosed snobs are dead frickin' wrong. They're dead wrong. Shakespeare didn't sound like Queen Elizabeth. Shakespeare didn't sound like all of these people like Laurence Olivier, who became the paragons of Shakespeare. They didn't sound like that at all. They sounded like real people. And to make the point really kind of come home, I think I'm going to take a quick little clip. Well, it's not so quick. I'm going to take the first paragraph or two of Hamlet's soliloquy, and I'm going to start off with Laurence Olivier's version, which takes forever. And he's perched on this rock, and he's got this ridiculous blonde accent, and he's just perched there, and it's, to be or not to be. That is the question. And he's sitting on this cliff, and there are waves crashing below, and the whole thing is this preposterous, pre-written script. Olivier is reading Hamlet's soliloquy off a teleprompter. And when I say that, I don't mean a real teleprompter. He's reading it off of the teleprompter in his mind. He knows exactly, he's known it for 50 years of his life. From the time he was probably a small child, he's memorized this. He knows exactly what the words are. He's got them memorized. And when he speaks them as a man reading a teleprompter. He speaks them as if he had memorized them. And now he's simply reading them back to you in a manner that you poor beastly peasants can look up to, but probably never really achieve. It's just this incredibly condescending attitude. And this was Shakespeare certainly since Laurence Olivier has been alive. That movie was made, I want to say, around 46, somewhere in there. And it's just so artificial, and it's so pre-written, it's so canned. It's basically what it is when you see Olivier reading the Hamlet soliloquy, acting it, I said reading it, that's what I meant to say. When Olivier does it, you can see that he is aware of the spotlight upon him. And he treats these words as if these are written words, not really supposed to be spoken words. And it's all out to the air. And it's all speaking to this cloud of vapor, and it's all about him, and it's all about this self-obsessed, narcissistic, wallowing in this whole idea of the suicide of, oh, should I not, receives his bare bodkin, and he holds his dagger. It's just pathetic. It's just terrible. And Eric mentioned this last week. David Mamet said about Laurence Olivier, "I'm hungry for lunch," and he's still serving an illustrated menu. There's no acting there. It's just affectation, much like our news media. So when you get to it, it's a prepared speech. There's nothing going on in real time. There's no questioning going on. It is a statement that's being read to the audience, and will brook no dissent. There will be no feedback. There will be no conversation. We're not going to have a discussion. This isn't a conversation. It's a pronunciation. It's a proclamation. That's the word I'm looking for. He gets up there and he unfolds the scroll and reads this document from the immortal bard to those beastly unwashed savages out there in the movie theater. Now you contrast that with what Ben Crystal did, which we showed last episode. And Ben Crystal does not do it in received pronunciation. He does it in original pronunciation. He does it the way it was supposed to be heard. And this is an enormous difference for a number of reasons, which Ben gives. None of these are mine. I'm just fascinated by it. The first thing that Ben says is that if you go to the Globe Theater, any of these other theaters, certainly the big ones when Shakespeare was at his peak, the Globe Theater is a circular theater, open-air theater. And there was nothing like the kind of lighting it would take to do these plays at night. These plays were not performed in the evening. These plays were performed probably around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They were done in the daylight. Now, that may not sound important to you, but what it means is if you've ever been on stage, and I suppose not many of this particular audience has been, but I have, and probably a few of you have, as an actor, when you're on stage as an actor in the modern world, you are in a room that is absolutely black, and there are bright lights in your eyes, and you are dimly aware that there's an open space over there where the audience is, but you certainly can't see anybody in the audience, certainly not in a decent-sized theater. And so there's this whole thing about it being very kind of, this is the fourth wall, right? The proscenium. You don't break the fourth wall when an actor turns to the audience. It's called breaking that fourth wall in a 3-wall set. You got the one side, the other side, the back. All the action takes place in here, and rarely somebody will break the fourth wall, and they'll turn to the audience, and in the movie theater, in the movies, it's done by turning directly to the camera. It's a powerful thing to do because it's like, patong, we're not watching a movie anymore. Now this person's speaking directly to you, and when they speak directly to you and their eyes don't leave you, it's extremely powerful. That's why most film directors don't have the nerve to do it ever. And those that do save it for their knockout punch. Because if you watch any conversation in movies, you'll see people looking at other people, talking back and forth. Their sight lines are always like this, but when they turn right to the camera and look at you, it gets your attention. But what Ben Crystal said was that in Shakespeare's day, with a theater where the stage was relatively small, but the point is no real artificial lights on the stage and the entire audience illuminated in the sunlight. He said you can see every single member of that audience, every one of them. And so it becomes an interaction. That's not to say there's audience participation, although I'm sure the audience really did get hooting and roaring and all the rest of the things that real people do when they're having a good time. But what Ben said about it was, he said it makes things like, many cases in Shakespeare, but it makes things like Hamlet's soliloquy completely different, because the way Ben reads it in that clip I showed last week, he's not making a pronunciation. He's not proclaiming this divine thing off of a scroll. He's asking for advice. He's asking for advice. He hasn't made up his mind yet. To think that Olivier's Hamlet hadn't made up his mind yet is preposterous. He's reading Hamlet. He's the greatest actor of our age, reading Hamlet. Okay, but the way Ben does it and the way Shakespeare wrote it was to be a guy who is basically so confused that he doesn't know how to figure out this central issue in his life. He's so miserable that he's asking a question. Now, in Olivier's version, to be or not to be, that is the statement. That's how it's read. It's not that is the question. There's no question about it. It's this soliloquy about how miserable I am and how fleeting life is and all the rest of it. It's about suicide. Ben says it's not about suicide. He says it's about mortality. It's about the actual living of life. And so basically he does the thing as an aside. Shakespeare wrote asides all the time in every single play virtually. He'll be having a scene where somebody's talking to somebody else, and then they'll turn to the audience and they'll basically say, oh, if she buys this, then we're in business. And he basically says it's essentially an aside. He turns to the audience. He says, to be or not to be? That's the question. What should I do? Should I, on one hand, whether it's nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or should I fight back against this? What should I do? And the idea of just going to sleep forever, it's kind of a great idea. I'm so weighed down with all these misery and guilt and the ghost and all the rest of it. It'd be just nice just to go to sleep and never wake up again. But if I do, what happens if the world of the afterlife is worse than the one I'm in now? Otherwise, I'd do it right now. Who wouldn't? Look at all these people suffering all these horrible diseases and living these miserable lives. And, if it turned out that all you got out of that, if you were sure that there was just nothing but rest and peace and heaven, everybody'd off themselves in a heartbeat. But we don't know. So that's why nobody does it, because we just don't know if it's going to be worse. That's the whole soliloquy right there. And it's an appeal, essentially, for advice on how to handle this issue. As he talks through it, he comes to a conclusion. But it's much more dynamic. And that's one thing that's interesting. The other thing that's interesting is this too. And I'm obviously going to take this 20-minute rant and try and get it in 3 or 4 minutes. But he said it does something else for you as an actor as well. He tells the story of when he first saw Shakespeare with his dad. They were doing the whole thing. They saw he was a very young boy, and they saw some production of some play or other, needless to say, probably at the Royal Shakespeare Company, but without question, needless to say, in received pronunciation. And Ben said to his dad, who was a Shakespeare scholar, he said, "This is great, Dad, but why isn't anybody moving? Why is everybody standing still? Why are they issuing these proclamations to each other? I'm going to say this to you, and then you shall turn to me. Well met, good fellow, and how now, sir? Why is everything so rigid? Why is it all locked down?" And what Ben said was, he said, it's something about received pronunciation that basically locks everything from here up. You have to have your chin has to be up, you have to have a stiff upper lip. And since everything is so dramatically clipped and so precise and so magnificently, precisely, carefully worded and pronounced, every single blessed syllable of it, it locks you here. And I realized that the term Ben was looking for is, it makes you a talking head. Makes you a talking head. You sit here and you read this thing in this kind of artificial language or accent, and it's a prepared script, and off you go, and there's our news media, who is looking down on Donald Trump and looking down on people like you and me. But the great point of all this, the reason I'm doing it in the first place, is because Shakespeare the genius didn't sound like that. Shakespeare the genius sounded like us. And Shakespeare the genius didn't speak like these toffee-nosed, half-bright snobs. Shakespeare spoke like a regular person. He spoke like a regular person to regular people about things that mattered to regular people. He was extremely bawdy. He made all kinds of puns and off-color jokes. He was not this creature that came in on a cloud. He wrote as well as he did because he knew people well. He knew common people well, and he was able to connect with them. And when the president says that Haiti's a shithole, whether he said it or not, everybody knows it's true. Everybody knows it's true. And all these Democrats and media people are just getting the vapors. They're just having fits. They're fainting dead away. That a man like Donald Trump, President of the United States, surrounded by other people in a closed room, might have the temerity to refer to that magnificent island as in such a vulgar way. Well, it practically drove me to tears. Please, 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 please. Nobody believes you when you say this. Nobody believes you when you say, this is shocking. I was shocked to the bone. No. You acted shocked, and you were expected to act shocked. And everybody knows that you're supposed to be shocked. But you weren't shocked. You may have been shocked that somebody reported that he said it, but the idea didn't knock you off your bar stool. I'm here to tell you, there's not a person alive, not one, who, if Trump said that, went, what is he talking about? No, not true. Eric Blake points out that Shakespeare was the Quentin Tarantino of his day. There's some truth to that. Tarantino writes dialogue that is so, it's Tarantino's dialogue is not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not photorealistic. It's not that, because that's horrendously boring. But Tarantino writes dialogue that sounds like it could come from anybody's mouth, but is just so damn interesting. And also in the same way as Shakespeare, much of Tarantino's dialogue, if you stand back and look at it, is just completely absurd. But it doesn't matter because it's so integral to the character that the character and the language become one. And a great example of that is in Pulp Fiction, you know, where you've got Vincent Vega, who's a bit mumbly, but more or less a regular guy. And then you have Sam Jackson, who has the most affected sort of character, but is so believable, you know. Is that a big Kahuna burger? Can I have a bite? I'm really hungry. Can I have a drink of your soda? Sprite or whatever it was. That is delicious. And you know that he's just toying with him. But the idea that these two hitmen would have a discussion about what a hamburger, what a Big Mac is, what a quarter pounder is called in France. There's no hitmen that talk that way. There's no assassins, you know, street thugs that speak about, you know, Royale with cheese. But it sounds like the kind of thing that they would say. In any event, Shakespeare, as read by Ben Crystal, doesn't sound to me like he's got a message that he's giving us. He doesn't sound like he's got a pre-recorded message that he's trying to ram down our throats. It sounds to me like he's reporting on the news. He's basically saying, here's what's going on. All right? I don't know what to do, honestly. On one hand, we get this, on the other hand, we get that. It's a tough call. And therein lies the tail. Therein hangs the tail. Our news media is a bunch of toffee-nosed snobs reading proclamations to the great unwashed who they feel so superior to because they all hang out together, went to the same schools, go to the same cocktail parties as the rest of you savages who somehow by some accident of fate got the vote. And furthermore, not only got the vote, but upended their carefully laid plans, which of course are for your own good. So, yeah, Shakespeare and shitholes, I guess. I'm going to take a small issue with something I just saw here just because people seem to like me talking about movies. Dave Big Booty, I admire enormously, always does our pre-show countdown, said that in Quentin Tarantino films, dialogue is chrome. I wouldn't call that chrome. I think it's much more important than chrome. In Tarantino's movies Tarantino's movies, at least the early ones, are an excuse for the language. Some entire scenes are written just because he likes the sound of how these people sound. And because it's so unrelated to the story, but because it's so essentially a part of the story, that I ascribe chrome to me are elements of things that you just pop in there for added luster and added effect. Trying to think of a good example of what chrome would be. It's generally little details and things that but the dialogue in Tarantino films is not inconsequential. It's not decoration. It's the whole reason there's a movie. Reservoir Dogs is a brilliant film. I just love that movie so much. And I love it because you've got these murderers who speak like, sometimes they speak like, 14-year-old girls, and sometimes they speak like a bunch of, old men playing dominoes, and it's not really about anything so much as it's about the sound of it. I mean, you've got these guys who are about to go on a bank job, and they're sitting there in a restaurant, they're eating breakfast, and they're talking about whether or not you should tip the waiter or the waitress. And it just goes on and on and on. And I don't know if it was in one of his movies or not, but I know there's this one thing. I think it's in Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction. I think it might be in Reservoir Dogs. But basically, there's like a 3-minute conversation where Tarantino, through his characters, is basically saying that Top Gun is the story of homosexuality at war with heterosexuality, and that Tom Cruise eventually decides to leave the world of the woman and join the world of the men. And it sounds a little ridiculous, but when you hear Tarantino's characters talking about it, it's just very convincing, very good. So that's the power that sits underneath all of us, lies underneath this volcano back here that I'm trying to tap into. So that's storytelling, and I rather like this firewall idea. I just think it's interesting. So that's it for our warm up. We probably can only go till, wow, it's already 7. My God, the time flies. How about if we go to 7:30, something like that? So I do have some stuff I need to do tonight. In any event, onward to the page of questions.